for having a wonderful day. In today's episode, Jack risks his life when a devastating landslide strikes the construction site. Meanwhile, Tu Tien discovers a secret letter that may finally expose the truth behind the stolen land. But just as everyone begins to believe that Jack has disappeared forever, a dangerous man realizes that Jack's evidence is still out there. Will Tu Tien find Jack before it is too late? And how far will the real villain go to bury the truth? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapter of this emotional story. Jack. A desperate scream tore through the construction site as the mountain began to collapse. A massive wall of mud, rocks, and broken trees thundered down the steep slope. Workers scattered in every direction, abandoning their tools and machinery as the ground shook violently beneath their feet. Jack heard the warnings, but he did not run. A young worker named Min remained trapped beneath a twisted steel frame only a few meters from the unfinished retaining wall. One of his legs was pinned beneath a heavy beam. Every time he tried to pull himself free, the metal sank deeper into the mud. "Don't move!" Jack shouted as he ran toward him. "I'm going to get you out!" Min shook his head in terror. "The mountain is coming down. Leave me and save yourself." Jack dropped to his knees beside him and wrapped both hands around one of the steel bars. "I'm not leaving anyone behind." Two other workers tried to reach them, but a section of scaffolding collapsed between them, forcing them to retreat. Mud surged across the construction site. Loose tools disappeared beneath the rushing water, while large metal panels shook violently against their supports. Jack examined the beam pressing against Min's leg. "It's trapped against your boot," Jack said. "When I lift the frame, pull your leg out immediately. You can't lift that by yourself. I don't need to lift it for long." Jack grabbed the broken wooden support and forced it beneath the steel frame. He pressed down with all his strength, using the wood as a lever. The frame lifted slightly. "Now!" Jack shouted. Min pulled his leg free and rolled away. The wooden support snapped. The steel frame crashed back into the mud only inches from Jack's hands. Before either man could move, a deafening crack echoed from the mountain. Every worker looked up. A huge section of earth above the retaining wall separated from the slope. Trees leaned forward. Rocks began to fall. Then the entire hillside moved. "Run!" Jack shouted. He grabbed Min beneath the arms and pulled him to his feet. Min cried out in pain as he tried to place weight on his injured leg. "I can't walk! Put your arm around me!" Jack pulled Min's arm across his shoulders and carried most of the young man's weight. Behind them, the unfinished retaining wall cracked down the middle. Concrete fragments, steel bars, and muddy water exploded across the site. Several workers reached the higher road and turned back. "Jack! Hurry!" Jack struggled forward as Min's injured leg dragged through the mud. The roaring sound behind them grew louder. A wave of earth struck the lower section of the construction site, crushing wooden supports and pushing a yellow excavator sideways. Jack reached the edge of the safer road and shoved Min toward the waiting workers. "Take him." Two men grabbed Min and dragged him away. Jack was only a few steps behind them when a second wave of mud and debris crashed down the slope. A large metal panel broke loose and flew toward him. Jack raised his arm instinctively. The panel struck his shoulder and threw him to the ground. "Jack!" He tried to push himself up, but pain shot through his arm. The mud reached him before he could stand. It swept across the road, carrying broken wood, stones, and twisted metal. The last thing Jack heard was someone screaming his name. Then the world disappeared beneath the roar of the mountain. At Tu Tien's house, the floor suddenly trembled. The wooden window frames rattled. Several cups fell from a shelf and shattered on the floor. Tu Tien held tightly to the metal box Jack had hidden beneath the floorboards, while her mother steadied herself against the wall. Luan rushed onto the porch and stared toward the mountains. A thick brown cloud rose above the forest. "The construction site," he whispered. Tu Tien ran outside with Jack's letter clenched in her hand. "What happened?" Luan stared at the collapsing slope in the distance. "It's a landslide." For a moment, Tu Tien could not breathe. Jack was there. She turned toward the road and began running. Her mother caught her by the arm. "Tu Tien, you can't go out there. Jack is at the construction site." The road may already be blocked. I have to find him. Her mother held her more tightly. You won't help Jack by getting yourself buried, too. Tu Tien tried to pull away. Please let me go. Luan stepped between them. I'll go. Tu Tien looked at him in disbelief. You? Luan placed the wet documents he had discovered inside his jacket. I still need answers from Jack, and if he stayed behind to save those workers, then he deserves the chance to give them. I'm coming with you. The road will be dangerous. I don't care. Luan saw the determination in her face and realized that he would not be able to stop her. Stay close to me, he said. Do not leave the road unless I tell you it is safe. Tu Tien turned to her mother and placed Jack's metal box in her hands. Keep this safe. Her mother looked inside the box. It contained documents, photographs, handwritten notes, and a small flash drive. What is all this? I think it is the reason Jack has been hiding the truth. Tu Tien unfolded the letter and read the first lines again. My dear Tu Tien, if you are reading this, I may not have been able to explain everything in time. Her hands trembled. She wanted to continue reading, but another deep rumble came from the mountains. The sound shook the entire village. Luan called to her from the gate. We have to leave now. Tu Tien placed a letter inside her jacket and followed him into the rain. The road leading to the construction site had become a river of mud. Fallen branches blocked several sections. Water rushed down the mountainside, carrying small rocks and broken pieces of wood across the road. Luan found a long wooden pole and used it to test the ground before every step. Step exactly where I step, he warned. Tu Tien followed closely behind him. She held on to tree trunks, fence posts, and anything else she could reach whenever the ground shifted beneath her feet. As they moved through the storm, Luan kept thinking about the handwritten document he had found inside Jack's files. One sentence remained fixed in his mind. Revise the compensation list as instructed. The signature beneath those words did not belong to Jack. But Luan recognized the initials. He had seen them before on documents his father had hidden inside an old cabinet. The initials belonged to Deputy Director Vu, one of the executives responsible for approving the redevelopment project. For 2 years, Luan had blamed Jack for destroying his family. He had believed that Jack helped the company take their land and reduce the compensation payments. But what if Jack had never stolen anything? What if someone had used Jack's name to hide a much larger crime? Tu Tien, Luan said. She looked at him without slowing down. There is something you need to know. What is it? The document I found at your house was not signed by Jack. Tu Tien stopped walking. What did you say? Someone else signed it. I think the compensation records were changed after Jack approved the engineering plans. For the first time since Jack had left, a trace of hope appeared on her face. Then, he was telling the truth. I still don't know everything. You accused him without knowing the truth? Luan lowered his gaze. I saw his name on the project documents. My father died believing that the project had destroyed our family. I needed someone to blame. And you chose Jack. I may have been wrong. Tu Tien stepped closer to him. If something happens to him before you can apologize, admitting that you were wrong will not change anything. Luan had no answer. They continued toward the construction site. The survivors had gathered near the damaged entrance. Some workers were bleeding. Others were covered from head to toe in mud. Several men were shouting the names of missing co-workers. Emergency crews had not arrived because the main road had been blocked by fallen trees and landslide debris. Jack's supervisor stood beside a pickup truck, counting the workers. 27, 28, 29. He looked around urgently. Where is Min? A worker pointed toward the muddy slope. Jack pulled him out. Min is injured, but he is alive. And Jack? No one answered. The supervisor looked toward the collapsed section of the site. Where is Jack? A young worker slowly removed his helmet. He pushed Min toward us. Then the second landslide hit. The supervisor stared at the field of mud, broken concrete, and twisted steel. Start searching. An engineer stepped forward. The slope is still unstable. Another section could collapse. The supervisor turned toward him. Jack risked his life for every person here. We are not leaving him beneath that mountain. The workers gathered ropes, shovels, wooden poles, and metal rods. They formed small teams and carefully moved toward the debris. Inside the temporary construction office, Deputy Director Vu watched them through the window. He held the phone tightly against his ear. His assistant stood beside him. The landslide buried the entire northern section, the assistant said. Jack was inside the impact zone. Has his body been found? Not yet. Vu's expression hardened. Then do not assume that he is dead. The assistant glanced toward the filing cabinets. What should we do with the documents? Remove every file connected to the compensation records before the investigators arrive. What about the security footage? Delete it. The assistant hesitated. There are workers outside. Someone could see us. Vu turned toward him. If Jack survives, those files could destroy all of us. He stepped closer and lowered his voice. Make sure that nothing connected to him survives. Outside, the workers dug through the mud. One of them struck something with a shovel. Wait. The others gathered around him. He reached into the mud and pulled out Jack's yellow safety helmet. One side of the helmet was badly cracked. The supervisor took it from him slowly. No one said a word. At the edge of the construction site, Tu Tien and Luan arrived just as the workers gathered around the damaged helmet. Tu Tien recognized it immediately. Her legs nearly gave way beneath her. No. She pushed through the crowd. Where is Jack? The supervisor looked at her but could not answer. Where is he? She demanded again. One of the workers pointed toward the collapsed slope. He saved Min. And Jack? The worker lowered his eyes. The mud took him. Tu Tien stared at the mountain of debris. Then she ran toward it. Several workers caught her before she could enter the unstable area. Let me go! Miss, it is too dangerous! Jack! Her voice echoed across the ruined construction site. Jack, answer me! No answer came. Only the sound of rain striking broken concrete and twisted metal filled the silence. Luan stood behind her, staring at the cracked helmet. For the first time, all the anger he had carried toward Jack disappeared. Only guilt remained. Tu Tien fell to her knees in the mud. She pulled Jack's letter from inside her jacket and pressed it against her chest. You promised that you would come back. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the wet paper. Beneath the opening lines, Jack had written, For the past 2 years, I have been collecting evidence that the land compensation records were altered. I remained with the project, because if I left, the people responsible would destroy every piece of evidence. I know you may believe that I chose my work instead of choosing you. The truth is that I stayed because I wanted to return what had been stolen from families like Luan's. Tu Tien covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. She forced herself to continue reading. The next sentence made her freeze. The man responsible knows that I discovered the truth. His name is Vu. A few meters away, Deputy Director Vu stood behind the office window. He watched Tu Tien holding the letter. His eyes narrowed as he realized what she had discovered. Jack might have disappeared beneath the mountain, but his secret had not disappeared with him. Vu slowly reached for his phone. Find out what that woman is holding, he said. His assistant looked through the window. Who is she? Jack's wife. What do you want me to do? Vu stared at Tu Tien. Do whatever is necessary. Outside, Tu Tien folded the letter and placed it safely inside her jacket. She looked toward the mountain of mud and debris. I know you are alive, Jack, she whispered. And I will find you. Far below the collapsed slope, hidden beneath broken trees and rocks, a bloodied hand moved weakly through the mud. Jack opened his eyes. He tried to call out, but no sound came from his mouth. Above him, the mountain began to shift again.